This is the Real Christian Manliness Podcast with Isaac and Tim Ingram. Let's get manly. Well, all right, manly men out there. It's another episode of the Real Christian Manliness Podcast. I am your host, Isaac Ingram, and I also have your other host, Tim Ingram, down in Texas.
Hello, men. How are you all?
You know what, Tim? Your, podcasting delivery has gotten better. It really has.
Well, thank you, but I think I was pretty good to begin with.
So, how's it going?
If we can just get your interviewing skills up to par, we'll be in business.
Hey, I'm working on it. I'm waiting for you to jump in on some interviews. So,
Yeah.
how's it going this early Sunday morning?
Yeah, it is Sunday morning. After a late Saturday night, I was not out partying. I was at a United States soccer game, which was a blast. We won 2-0, beat Costa Rica.
Them Costa Ricans, I tell you what, they try to come to our turf and win. Not today.
It wasn't turf. They put grass over the turf.
Oh, it was actual grass?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's cool. How's the weather down there?
Hot.
Yeah.
Hot.
It gets up into the 90s here now, but it still cools off at night to where you have to shut the window.
Oh, bless your heart.
I know, it's tough. So, well, anyway, why don't we get rolling into our topic for today? All right, today we're going to talk about something that's very manly in my estimation, and that is work ethic. And I think that's very important, and I think it's something that it's taken me a long time to figure out, and I still have to work on it. So you think it's important to have some work ethic, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And at my job, I am involved in training people a little bit, and it is shockingly depressing how hard it is to find people nowadays that have a work ethic, that can show up to work every day, can be on time. It really is pretty sad.
Yeah, and see, I can relate because Tim and I worked in the same place. I was at his place in Texas for 4 or 5 years at least, and so, and I was also involved in training and some other things, and he is exactly right. Sometimes it's, you have a guy show up late on his first day and then never show up at all again after that, and, people that are just hit and miss for the rest of their career at the, if you can call it that, at our workplace. But work ethic is an important thing. Now,
We had a guy.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we had a guy a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month ago now. He showed up for the first day of the training class, and then 2 hours into his second day, he said, "What time is our first break?" And we said, we don't have a break until 4 hours into the shift or 5 hours into the shift or whatever it was. And he said, I have to have like 4 breaks a day or something. So he left after just 2 hours of work.
Well, there you go. Well, anyway, as far as the Christian side, I think it's important to, make some biblical references. I think the main thing is that God instituted work, and that's something that he instituted from the very beginning, all the way back in Genesis 2, whenever he gave Adam the job of keeping and dressing the garden. And one thing I realized, but I didn't really put 2 and 2 together until I started studying for this podcast, is that he instituted work before sin entered into the world. And
Yes.
And so when you look at the series of events, work falls into the category, or actually, I wouldn't say it falls into the category, but Adam was working in the very good part of creation. When God said that it was good what he had created, Adam was to tend to that very good part. And so a lot of time we think of work as just an awful sin that we have to endure, but the work itself isn't sin. It's not a part of that depravity and the fall of man. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing before I even looked at this outline you sent over to me. that the curse wasn't work. The curse was the sweat
Yep.
and the toil and the hard aspect of it. And yeah, it work was there before, and that's what Adam was there to do in the garden, was to work and to take care of it and to develop it. And yeah, exactly, it's a great point.
Yeah.
And also,
Go ahead.
yeah, also, you know, before, well, the Bible calls God's creation of the earth work, and it was something that He made. It was an act. It was work. It was labor.
Yep.
As He created. So He gave an example on His own of being a worker.
Yeah. God's a worker, and Jesus worked as a carpenter, and God gave Adam the job of working. And when you just look at the series of events, Genesis 1 talks about the creation being very good. Genesis 2 talks about Adam working in the garden, and Genesis 3 is whenever it says 3:17, I think it is, in the sweat of thy face thou shalt eat bread. I think at the end of verse 19 it talks about cursed is the ground for thy sake, and in sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. And so I think it's very important, though, to realize that work is a good thing. And as my father-in-law says all the time, is like, I love work. I could watch it being done all day.
Sounds like something he would say.
Yeah, but that's more sarcasm than anything. He's one of the hardest working guys I know. But also, on top of the importance of work and the institution of work, is that it's a requirement for survival, even. Because in 2 Thessalonians 3:10 it talks about if any would not work, neither should he eat. And in today's age, whenever there's a lot of welfare and a lot of handouts and things like that, I think too many, it creates a false, or not a false, but just a perverse, what's the word I'm looking for? A perverse incentive to not work. Anything that encourages you not to work, I think that's perverted and wrong. Because if you're not working, you shouldn't eat.
Yeah, it's I think they call it de-incentivite. They're de-incentive. I can't spit out the word, but yeah, it makes people want to do the opposite of what they're supposed to do. It's a bad influence, and it's a negative consequence on what the government tries to do by giving out welfare and helping people. Now, granted, there are people out there that do need help, but a lot of people get stuck up in that welfare aspect, and they don't want to work. And I've seen and met guys that have their own little game going, to where they'll get a job for a little while, and then get themselves fired so they can claim unemployment.
Yep.
And then they'll stay on unemployment as long as they can, and then they'll get another job just long enough to get fired and get unemployment again.
Yeah, and then there's those YouTube videos of people talking about which counties you need to move to because you can get this thing, and which city you can request this benefit from, and all this stuff. It's just total gaming of the system of, well, if you're smart enough and you can work hard enough to move to different areas just so that you can collect benefits, you can probably work hard enough to get a job. And the recession is over, and unemployment isn't the best, but it's better than it's been in a little while. So, but and the Bible even talks about, in that same chapter of 2 Thessalonians, to withdraw yourself from every brother that walketh disorderly. And when you look at the context of that scripture, it's talking about working. It's the same few verses of, if any man not work, neither should he eat. And so we shouldn't even hang out with people that have poor work ethics. We should try not to associate with them as much. I mean, and I think that's a good idea, because I believe that you tend to be like the people that you're around. You don't tend to bring those up that have poor work ethics. You can encourage them, and sometimes it works, but if you're hanging out with them, you'll most likely fall into that trap.
Yeah, it's kind of an iron sharpening iron situation. You want to get yourself around people that work hard and have a drive and have a work ethic, and let that stuff rub off on you. And I've seen countless people at my job that are hard workers, and they get switched to a different shift or whatever, and get around people that just like to sit around and talk. and then all of a sudden they're one of the lazy people at the job, and they used to be really, really good workers.
Yeah, and it's the same way at where I work. I think you have certain new people that when you're training them, I was training somebody a couple days ago for a few days, and he was really good, but he's going to a different shift, and so I kind of said might want to stay away from this person. Don't learn too much from them. You can learn more from this person. In hopes that he turns out okay. So, but and I don't want to seem like we're heartless as far as people that can't work, but the Bible has stipulations for that. When you look over in Leviticus 23, it's talking about how you're supposed to harvest your land, and it says, when you reap the harvest of the land, thou shalt not make clean riddance of the corners of thy field. And it says, neither gather any gleaning of thy harvest. Thou shalt leave it unto them, the poor, and to the stranger. So it's one thing is that it makes provision for those who are poor and those who are strangers in the land and things like that. And it says you're not going to till up, or you're not going to gather the whole field from corner to corner. You're going to leave the edges so that they have something. But one thing that's cool is that it says that there's enough for them to gather themselves. It doesn't say cut it down and give it to them. It says there's enough for them to cut down themselves. It gives them the opportunity to work. And I think that was an awesome verse that I found.
Well, yeah, even like out and about throughout the day, you have people come and ask for money and things like that. I always feel more eager to help somebody out that comes up and say, "Hey, is there anything I can do for you that you can pay me?" As opposed to people that are just going to say, "Hey, can you give me some food?" or "Hey, can I have $5 or whatever?" Yeah.
Yeah, and it's better than those that come up and wash your windshield without your permission and then ask for money for it.
Yeah, that's a European phenomenon, I think.
I remember whenever we were kids, and those guys would walk up. We'd be driving up to the intersection, and Dad would see those guys coming off, and he'd almost jump out of the car just to stop them from touching the car because he didn't want to have to pay him for something that he didn't ask for.
Yeah, good times.
It's funny, and even talking about that, I think it was it Tom Williams was down in Timisoara with us, and there was a beggar out in the marketplace, and Tom Williams gave him some Romanian currency bill, and it was probably around a month's worth of wages for that individual. And as soon as he got that, he picked up his blanket and started walking off because he was sitting on his leg like it was amputated or something, trying to hide it.
Well, there's that other guy that used to beg down at the big shopping center in town, and one day Dad gave him money, and then as we were walking out, he saw him get out and go get into his brand new Mercedes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's somewhat of work ethic. I wouldn't say it's very honest or upright.
Well, and I've even seen articles on the news here where they interview people that go out and beg on the street and talk about how much money they make.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, didn't Fort Worth pass something about panhandling in
some of the
recent
cities
days?
around here have had different city ordinances about begging and panhandling and stuff like that.
Yep. So, that it's important that we give those that are poor or those that need a little help an opportunity to work, because then I think that you avoid making that perverse incentive, that de-incentivization. I think I said that right.
That's what I was trying to say.
Oh, did I get it right?
That's what I was trying to say that, but it didn't come out.
Oh man, those speech classes are paying off, but and it's important to work hard is one thing I came over, because I mean not everybody, but many Christians have heard of Ecclesiastes 9:10. It says, "Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might," and there's a lot of other supporting verses along the way that talk about working hard and do it with thy might and do it as unto the Lord and those type things, and hard work is important. And I think the main reason for me, at least now with my wife about to give birth any day now, is that hard work is important so that you can provide for your family. Um, I've always been taught out of 1 Timothy 5:8 how it says, "But if any provide not for his own, and specifically for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worth." I'm having a hard time with my ths.
Yeah.
But it says, "And he is worse than an infidel." And
Yeah.
those are some pretty strong words.
Yeah, you don't want to be worse than an infidel.
I mean, if we could get some of these, welfare cats that could work a job with no problem and tell them, would you rather be worse than ISIS? Or,
No, they call us the infidel.
oh, we're the infidels. I
Yeah.
got that wrong.
So they're worse than a spoiled American.
Yeah. And not only is it important for us to provide for our family, I mean, I agree 100% that you're worse than an infidel if you can't provide for your family if you have an able body. I mean, like we said before, it's one thing if you actually can't. You're stuck in a wheelchair or something like that, and there's still ways to find to make money. But hard work also gives us the opportunity to thrive. And I don't think God ever wanted us to live a meager existence. I think He wanted to live a humble existence and not necessarily an extravagant life. God talks about life and life more abundant. I think that can be
Right.
applied materially, but in Proverbs 14:23 it says, "In all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to poverty." And so the Bible talks about profit and talks about, not just subsistence. It talks about profiting and a little bit above average. And I don't think God wants us to be, poor, living paycheck to paycheck.
No, absolutely. He wants us to live an abundant life, a fruitful life,
And
and
when the Bible talks about, leaving an inheritance to your children and to your children's children, you can't do that if you're living paycheck to paycheck. And the Bible also talks about, the borrower is, servant to the lender. And that's not the type of thing that we should get into, to where we have to live on credit and live on these things. We should be able to pay for our own bills and not live from this pay period to next pay period. And I think it's also important that we be independent, and that's not just because I'm an independent Baptist or anything like that, or that I'm a constitutional conservative, but I think you can take pride in yourself if you can stand on your own 2 feet and provide for yourself. And it even talks about that in 2 Thessalonians 3. It talks about, "For yourselves know ye ought to follow us, for we behave not ourselves disorderly among you." There's that disorderly, and I think that's being used as lazy in a lot of ways. But it also continues to say, "Neither did we eat any man's bread for naught, but we wrought with labor and travail night and day, that we might not be chargeable to any of you." So he's talking about, we worked our own way through. We didn't mooch, off
Right.
of our parents. We didn't mooch off of the big hearts of the church members and things like that. And because I remember, well, going back a little bit, we talk about kids having cell phones at work. I've got a bunch of parents at work, that I work with, and they talk about their kids' cell phone and having to pay for those. And I'm thinking, it's like, I didn't have my own cell phone probably till I was 19 or 20, working my own job, paying for it myself. I mean, yet again, that's 15 years ago, but that's one thing. But whenever you're in your 20s or 30s and still on your parents' cell phone plan, that's a whole nother story.
yeah. Something I like to add here, talking about hard work. My old pastor before he retired used to always say, it doesn't matter if you work with your hands or with your mind. All work is hard, and hard work is honorable to God. So it doesn't matter if you're out there in a field, uh, plowing plowing for crops and planting seeds, or building a building, or if you work in an office and you're an accountant or a web developer. As long as you're out there working and doing it with all you have, and being diligent about it,
Yep.
that's good and that's honorable. We got the society that we live in today. That's part of work.
Yep. And I'm glad you used the word diligent, because I think diligence is a very needed factor in work. And I think you can attest to that as to your workplace, where people just kind of get the job done, but they don't necessarily do it in a diligent way. And you see that all the time. As long as this place is clear and we got this truck unloaded, it doesn't matter how we stack it or where we put it, those type things.
Right.
And the same thing where I work with these at-risk kids. As long as we get them fed, as long as we get them to school, as long as we get them, worked out, it doesn't matter how we do it, when there's a very clear standard of the discipline that we're supposed to instill into them and the way they're supposed to do things. And I think diligence is huge. And you're exactly right about, brain work and back work. So,
Yeah, 100%.
and the last thing I have written down here talks about the Bible doesn't condone workaholism or workaholics and greed. And there's a fine balance, I think, between prosperity and greed. And the best verse I can think of is in Matthew, where it talks about laying not yourselves up treasures on earth, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. And that's huge. And I don't think that that's a contradiction with what we said earlier, because it's one thing to be profitable and to thrive, but there's another thing to lay up treasures on earth. It's another thing to value those things more than you ought to, and be greedy for those things. And it's one thing to provide for your family, but it's another thing to be gone 60, 70, 80 hours a day and not spend time with your family, because as a father and as a husband, it's your job to care for the physical needs, but also the spiritual and emotional needs of your family. And so it can get disproportionately wrong to spend more time providing. I mean, if you have to just to survive. I think that may take a little bit of priority. But as a man, you need to figure out how you can provide for those other needs and not be a workaholic where you just live for work and you live for the almighty dollar. And God even instituted a day of rest so that we could take that time for ourselves. And that's another thing that gets overlooked. I think it's very important to care for yourself as a man. Of course, I think that comes a little bit after the financial and emotional and spiritual needs of your family. But at the same time, if you're not on your A game and you're not walking with God and you're not taking care of yourself physically and spiritually and emotionally and mentally, intellectually, then you're not going to be able to provide diligently and effectively for your family. And that's one thing that I learned a little bit later on in my adulthood, that I need to really take care of myself in order to be able to take care of those that I will eventually and that I now have in my life.
Yeah, and I've heard a few guys talk about being offered promotions that would increase the amount of time they have to spend at work. There'll be increase in money as well, but they've sacrificed for their family because they didn't want to give up the time that
Yep.
it would take away from the family, because it's important
Yep.
to take care of every aspect of your family, not just providing for them.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of, I don't know if it's a lot, but I've seen several people in our church move away for a job or whatever, but there wasn't a good church or a good body of believers around them, and you kind of see them hindered in their life because of that. So there's a lot of considerations that go into that. And so I think it's very important that we learn to have a work ethic, and it's something that I think every man will have to work with. It's not something that you can just get and achieve. It's something that we're gonna have to work for. Even if you have a solid work ethic and we're raised that way, that sin nature is gonna tug at you to. You're gonna have to constantly maintain it and just keep working hard, even especially when there's a lot of people around you who aren't. You have to work hard to continue to work hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's it's amazing the human nature and the effect that people can have on you, and you have to constantly uh, be on top of yourself and keep yourself in the right mindset and keep yourself at your work and working hard.
Yep. You got anything else to add? Because that's all I've got.
Well, that was one thing I meant to say earlier when we were talking about working hard and the difference between physical labor or mental labor, and uh, sometimes uh, if you don't have a father or an adult that has a manual job, that but they do a lot of mental work or office work or things like that, it's hard for children to pick up on a good work ethic because they don't see a
Yep.
father that does manual labor, which I think may have been the case for me.
Yeah, and
Because
I've said that. I've said that before to other
yeah,
people.
yeah, my father was a pastor, and he worked really really hard at it. And looking back, I see it, but as a kid, it wasn't quite as obvious to me how hard he was, how hard of a worker he was, and it's something that I had to develop later on, or as I grew up in life. Because whenever I first got out into the workforce, I wasn't a hard worker, and it's something that I had to develop over time. And if you're out there listening and you're thinking it's like, well, I'm not really that hard of a worker, it's something that you can develop. It's something
Hmm.
that you can work on.
And the it's funny how it works. The harder of a worker you are, I think the more your career options open up. And I think that's very true in multiple places I've worked, but especially at the warehouse where Tim works now. I mean, we both were in some type of leadership or extra duty type um, job that required us to be diligent and to work hard, and it kind of separated us from a lot of the other workforce. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
There's guys that looked down on me or didn't like me or whatever because I came in and within a year or a year and a half I was getting raises and getting promotions and such that they didn't. But they just sat around doing the bare minimum, and I was going above and beyond what was required of me,
Yep.
and bosses noticed that.
Yep. And where I'm at now, I've been here for about 11 months, and I got somewhat of a promotion to assistant team leader, and so that means that I'm the team leader whenever the real team leader is gone. So, and that comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure, but there's a lot of people that applied and didn't cut the mustard. So, but yeah, I think that's a pretty good breakdown that we've discussed. And if you have any other things to add, feel free to, go to our Facebook page and comment, and just put in your 2 cents, and maybe we can start a conversation over it. But I think work ethic is something that's missing from a lot of men these days, and not just men, but even Christian men. It's it's funny because whenever you work for a Christian that tries to hire people from the church and tries to hire people from, say the Bible college, I mean, I think that's great, but a lot of times those people think that they have job security because we go to the same church or whatever. And I was the same way, working as a janitor. The first time, I didn't have that work ethic, and I ended up losing my job over it. Um, but it's important that no matter what situation you're in, whether you're working for a friend or you find your job online, or you go through the interview process and all that stuff, that you work hard, because that's a reflection not only on you and on your family, but it's a reflection on your relationship with Christ. And if you don't have a good work ethic and you're advertising yourself as a Christian in the workplace, then you're shaming God by not working hard for your employer.
It's like our pastor always says, if you go out to eat after church and you don't leave it, or if you don't leave an adequate tip, don't leave a church tract with it. So the same thing, if you're going to have a job and tell everybody you're a Christian, don't go out there and be the laziest person in the building. Be the hardest worker in the building, and leave a good testimony for Christ and for other believers.
Yep. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up. It's been a good conversation. I think it's something that will be a help. And if you're a man out there and you can look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, I need to work harder, challenge yourself to, this upcoming week, or the next month, to just work hard at whatever you're doing. And even if you're unemployed or underemployed, work hard at getting a job or getting a better job. And I think Christ would be honored by you doing that. And so with that, I think it was a good conversation, Tim.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Well, if you're out there and you're listening, just go ahead and share this, like this, rate this, do what you can to spread the word. Just keep it real, keep it Christian, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Real Christian Manliness Podcast. We hope you enjoyed our show. Now, if you could do us a favor, go over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. That way other people can find us easily in the rankings. And if for some reason you don't think we deserve 5 stars, give us whatever you think we deserve, but please explain why we got that rating in a review. Now make sure you subscribe and have a great day.